Well, anything good I ever did. Nobody ever said a thing. Never said, well done, or was it okay? But if I...
It was folded, sealed, hidden inside something nobody had opened in nearly 3 decades. Diana wrote it by hand, no assistant, no advisor, no one standing over her shoulder telling her what to say or how to say it. Just her, a pen, and the truth as she lived it. William found it. He read it alone. And when he finished, he sat with it for a long time before he told anyone what was in it. Then he decided Camilla needed to know he had found it. That conversation happened, and the woman who had spent 30 years as one of the most composed figures in the British royal family had, for once, nothing to say. What was in that letter? And why did it leave her speechless? The letter that was never meant to surface. Diana wrote letters constantly, not emails, not typed correspondence passed through assistants and private secretaries. Handwritten letters in the looping distinctive script that anyone who has seen her personal correspondence recognizes immediately. She wrote to friends, to charities, to people she had met briefly at public engagements who had moved her in some way. She also wrote letters she never sent. That practice, of writing to process rather than to communicate, was something people close to Diana have referenced across multiple accounts of her private life. She needed to get things out of her head and onto paper. It was how she managed the pressure of a life that offered very few safe outlets for honest expression. Most of those unsent letters have never surfaced publicly. This one almost didn't either. It was found inside Kensington Palace, not in a vault, not in a locked archive managed by palace officials with restricted access. Inside a piece of furniture, a writing desk that had belonged to Diana and that had remained in storage at Kensington Palace since her death in August 1997. The desk had been moved several times over the intervening decades. Storage arrangements at royal palaces shift as occupants change and spaces are repurposed. Nobody had gone through its contents systematically. It had simply moved from one storage location to another, still containing whatever Diana had left inside it the last time she sat at it. William initiated a review of stored personal effects in late 2024. The reasons for that review were practical. A reorganization of storage at Kensington Palace connected to ongoing refurbishment work required an inventory of what was being held and decisions about what should be moved, preserved formally, or passed to Diana's estate. The desk was included in that inventory. The person conducting the inventory was a trusted member of William's household staff, not a junior administrator working through a checklist. Someone senior, someone William trusted with exactly the kind of discovery that sensitive personal effects from his mother's life might produce. When the desk was opened and its contents examined, the letter was found in a small interior drawer, the kind of drawer that sits recessed within a writing desk's main structure, not immediately visible, the sort of compartment that someone unfamiliar with the desk's design might miss entirely. The letter was sealed, Diana's handwriting on the front of the envelope. No name as an addressee, just a single word. The word has not been disclosed publicly, but sources familiar with the discovery describe it as a word that made immediately clear this letter was not intended for general circulation and that its contents were personal in a way that required careful handling. The staff member brought it to William directly. They did not open it, they did not read it. They carried it to William and placed it in his hands and told him where it had been found and how. William held it for a moment without opening it. He has not spoken publicly about what the moment felt like, holding something in his mother's handwriting that had been sitting undiscovered for nearly 3 decades. An object she had touched, words she had chosen, a communication she had sealed and placed somewhere and then died before whatever she intended to do with it could happen. He took it with him and he read it privately. The letter is several pages long. Sources who have been briefed on its contents describe it as unlike Diana's more emotionally raw private writing from the earlier years of her marriage. This is not the voice of a young woman processing loneliness and confusion. This is a woman in her mid-30s who has come through the worst of her experience inside the institution and has arrived at a clarity that is almost unsettling in how precise it is. She is not venting, she is documenting. The tone, by all accounts, is measured, deliberate. The kind of writing that comes from someone who has thought carefully about what they want to say and has chosen each word with the awareness that words once written outlast the person who wrote them. Diana understood that. She had seen enough of her own words surface publicly in ways she had not intended to know exactly how permanent the written word could be. She wrote this letter anyway, carefully, deliberately. And she sealed it and put it somewhere she expected it to stay. What she documented in those pages covers a specific period, the mid-1990s, the years when the marriage to Charles had publicly collapsed, but the formal divorce had not yet been finalized. The years when Diana was navigating her position inside an institution that had decided she was more liability than asset and was managing her accordingly. She writes about what she observed during that period, what she was told, what she came to understand about how decisions were being made around her and who was involved in making them. And she writes specifically about Camilla, not with the raw emotion that characterized some of her earlier private expressions about the affair and its impact on her marriage, with something colder and more specific than emotion, with documentation, names, dates, specific accounts of things she had been told or had witnessed directly. A record constructed with the care of someone who understood that feeling something was not enough, that if her account was ever going to matter, it needed to be more than feeling. It needed to be evidence. William read all of it. And when he finished, the question he sat with was not what his mother had written, or whether it was true. It was what he was going to do with it. That decision, and the chain of events it set in motion, is exactly where this story goes next. What Diana knew, Diana was not naive. That is the starting point for understanding what the letter contains and why its contents carry the weight they do. She is often remembered through the lens of vulnerability. The young woman, overwhelmed by the institution. The princess who cried in photographs and spoke about her pain in carefully arranged television interviews. That version of Diana is real. Those struggles were genuine. But it is half the picture. The other half is a woman who, by the mid-1990s, had developed an extraordinarily sharp understanding of how power operated inside the British royal family, who held it, how it was exercised, and how it was used against people the institution had decided were inconvenient. She had learned that understanding the hard way, and she had documented what she learned. The letter covers 3 specific areas. Sources familiar with its contents have described them consistently enough across separate accounts that a clear picture has emerged. The first concerns the coordination between Camilla and certain senior courtiers during the period when Diana's position inside the royal family was being actively managed. Diana had sources, people inside the palace who told her things, whether out of loyalty to her, discomfort with what they were being asked to do, or simply the human tendency to share information with someone who will receive it meaningfully. She received a steady flow of information about conversations and decisions happening around her that she was not officially party to. She cross-referenced what she was told, checked details against each other, built a picture from multiple sources rather than relying on any single account. What that picture showed her was that the management of her position inside the institution was not simply a response to the breakdown of her marriage. It was more coordinated than that, more deliberate. And Camilla's involvement in that coordination was more direct than the public narrative about a wronged wife and a rival has ever fully acknowledged. The second area concerns Diana's security arrangements in the final year of her life. This is the part of the letter that sources describe as most significant and most difficult to read. Diana had concerns about her security in the period following the divorce, specific documented concerns that she raised through appropriate channels and that were, by her account in the letter, not addressed with the seriousness she believed they warranted. She connects those concerns to specific decisions made by specific people. She does not speculate about motives. She records facts, dates when concerns were raised, names of people they were raised with, responses received or not received. She also records a specific conversation she had with someone she trusted inside the palace, a conversation in which she was told directly that her safety was considered a lower institutional priority than the management of her public profile. She wrote that down, word for word as best she could remember it, with the name of the person who said it. The third area is more personal and in some ways more devastating than the first 2. Diana writes about Charles, not with bitterness. The letter is notably free of bitterness toward Charles specifically, which sources who have been briefed on its contents find striking given everything that preceded it. She had processed her feelings about the marriage and about Charles's role in its failure by the time this letter was written. That processing is evident in the tone. What she writes about instead is her understanding of how Charles had been advised over years by people around him whose interests were not always aligned with his own or with the institution's. How certain relationships between Charles's advisors and Camilla's circle had shaped decisions about Diana in ways Charles may not have been fully aware of. She is not absolving Charles. She is contextualizing him, placing him within a system that was operating around him as much as through him. That distinction is important, and it is one that William, reading the letter as his father's son as much as his mother's, would have felt acutely. Diana had tried to communicate some of what she knew through official channels. The letter makes this clear. It is not her first attempt to put this information somewhere it would be taken seriously. She had raised specific concerns with specific people. She had provided specific information and asked for specific responses. She had been managed. Thanked for her concern. Reassured that matters were in hand, sent away with the practiced smoothness of an institution that has been handling inconvenient people for 1,000 years. The letter was her response to that smoothness. If the official channels would not receive what she knew, she would write it down herself and put it somewhere and trust that eventually someone would find it who would understand what they were reading. She was thinking about the future when she wrote it, the conditional future. If something happens to me, if this is ever needed, if someone is ever in a position to do something with this. She was thinking about William, not by name, necessarily. He was 15 when she wrote this. She was not writing to him directly, but she was writing for someone like him, someone who would one day have the standing and the authority and the access to do something with what she knew, someone who would care enough to try. She sealed it, put it in the drawer, and never came back for it. She died 6 months later in a Paris tunnel. And the letter sat in that desk for 27 years, through every biography and documentary and inquest and memoir and public reckoning with her life and death, undiscovered. Until William opened a drawer in a piece of his mother's furniture and found it waiting for him. He read it once straight through. Then he read it again slowly, going back over specific passages, cross-referencing what she had written against things he already knew, things he had been told over the years, things that had never quite added up until the letter provided the missing connective tissue. The picture that emerged when he finished reading was not entirely new to him, but it was complete in a way it had never been before. And completeness, when you have spent 30 years working from an incomplete picture of your mother's life and death, is not a neutral experience. It changes things. It changed William. William's reaction. When he read it alone. No aide in the room, no Catherine sitting beside him, no trusted advisor positioned nearby in case the contents required an immediate institutional response. Just William, the letter, and the specific silence of a private room at Kensington Palace on a winter afternoon in late 2024. He has not spoken publicly about that reading. He almost certainly never will. What happens in a person when they encounter their dead mother's private words about the circumstances of her life is not something that translates into palace statements or press briefings, but sources close to him have described what he was like in the hours and days that followed. And from those accounts, a picture emerges of a man who went through several distinct phases in rapid succession. The first phase was stillness. People who saw William in the immediate aftermath of reading the letter describe him as unusually quiet, not distressed in any visible or dramatic way, simply contained. Moving through his day at Kensington Palace with the careful deliberateness of someone carrying something heavy and choosing not to put it down until they were somewhere safe. He completed his scheduled obligations for that day, meetings that had been arranged, briefings that required his attention, the ordinary machinery of a working royal's afternoon. Nobody who interacted with him in those hours reported anything that suggested something significant had happened. He was present, professional, engaged with whatever was in front of him. But the people who know him well could see something was different. Catherine knew before he told her. That is not unusual between them. Their relationship, by every account from people close to both, operates at a level of mutual attunement that goes beyond the ordinary. They have been through enough together, her illness, his father's diagnosis, the years of navigating an institution that demands everything and explains nothing, that they read each other with accuracy that does not always require words. She saw it when he came home that evening. She did not push, she waited. She gave him the space to arrive at the telling in his own time, rather than extracting it from him before he was ready. He told her after dinner. The children were in bed. The house was quiet. He read her specific passages, not all of it. The parts that mattered most. The parts that changed the picture most significantly. Catherine listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked him 2 questions. What do you want to do with this? And what do you need right now? He answered the second question first. He needed time to think. She gave it to him. The thinking took approximately 2 weeks, not 2 weeks of paralysis. William does not do paralysis. 2 weeks of careful, methodical processing of what he had found and what it meant and what, if anything, should follow from it. He went back through things he already knew, accounts he had been given over the years about the circumstances of his parents' marriage and its breakdown, things Diana had said to him directly in the years before she died, things a teenage boy had heard and filed away without the framework to fully understand them, things that had surfaced in the years since, in biographies, in the inquest, in Harry's memoir, in the accumulation of public record about a life that had been examined from almost every angle except the one the letter now provided. He placed what the letter said against all of that existing knowledge. The fit was not perfect. Some of what Diana had documented raised new questions rather than answering old ones. Some of it confirmed things William had suspected without being able to confirm. And some of it, the parts concerning the specific coordination around her security arrangements, landed with a weight that the existing record had not prepared him for. He called Harry during those 2 weeks. The conversation was shorter than their previous ones about the diary, more focused. William was not calling to discuss or deliberate. He was calling to inform. He told Harry the letter existed. He told him where it had been found. He gave him a summary of its contents, moving through each of the 3 areas Diana had documented with the precision of someone who had read and reread the material enough times to have it organized clearly in his own mind. Harry listened. His response, according to sources, was quieter than William had expected, not the quick anger or the immediate call to action that might have characterized an earlier version of their dynamic. He asked William what he was planning to do. William said he was still deciding. Harry said he would follow William's lead on this one. That response, from a man who had spent several years very publicly not following anyone's lead, was noted by William, acknowledged. It meant something that, in this specific situation, with something this specific about their mother, Harry stepped back and let his brother drive. The emotional weight of the letter landed differently at different points across those 2 weeks. There were moments when William processed it primarily as information, as a document with contents that had implications and required a response. The future king's brain, trained toward institutional thinking and strategic clarity, working the problem. And there were other moments when it hit him simply as a son. His mother had been afraid. She had been afraid specifically, and she had documented that fear with the precision of someone who understood that her own account of her experience was unlikely to be believed without documentation. She had been right to be afraid. She died 6 months after writing the letter, and she had been right that documentation mattered, because 30 years later, her son was holding that documentation, and it was changing things. William does not cry easily in private any more than he does in public. The training that shapes a future king does not leave much room for that kind of release. But sources close to him describe at least one evening during those 2 weeks where Catherine found him sitting alone with the letter in his hands and simply sat with him without speaking. She did not ask how he was. She already knew. By the end of those 2 weeks, William had made his decision not to publish the letter, not to hand it to journalists or authorize any form of public release. That was never seriously considered. The letter was his mother's private writing, and he was not going to make it a media event regardless of what it contained. But he was not going to do nothing. Diana had documented specific things about specific people. Some of those people were dead. Some of them were not. One of them was very much alive and very much still, inside the institution his mother had written about. Camilla was still there. Still the queen consort. Still moving through the same palaces and attending the same events and occupying the same spaces that Diana had written about in those careful, precise pages. William decided she needed to know he had read them, not as a threat, not as leverage, as a simple, direct statement of fact. He had found his mother's letter, he had read what was in it, and he was not going to pretend he hadn't. What happened next was entirely up to her. He arranged the meeting through private channels. No official scheduling, no palace secretary was involved. A direct, quiet arrangement made through a single trusted intermediary that both parties understood was not to be documented or discussed outside the two people who needed to be in the room. Camilla received the request. She accepted it. She did not know specifically what the meeting was about. She knew it was William, and she knew it was private, and she knew that a private meeting requested with that level of discretion by the future king was not something she could reasonably decline. She walked into that meeting without knowing what was waiting for her. What was waiting for her changed everything. The decision to confront. William chose the location carefully. Not Kensington Palace. Not anywhere that belonged to him or that carried his imprint so strongly that Camilla would feel she was walking into his territory before the conversation even began. Not Buckingham Palace either. Too many staff. Too much institutional infrastructure around every room. Too many people whose job it is to notice things and remember them. He chose a private sitting room at Windsor Castle, neutral enough, familiar to both of them. A space that belonged to the institution rather than to either of them personally, which was exactly the right setting for a conversation that was going to be about the institution, whether it wanted to be or not. He told Catherine what he had decided to do. Her response was not an immediate endorsement. She asked him what he was hoping to achieve, not skeptically, practically. Catherine approaches difficult situations the way she approaches most things, by identifying the goal first and working backward from it. William's answer was straightforward. He was not hoping to extract an apology. He was not expecting Camilla to confirm everything Diana had written or fill in details Diana had left incomplete. He was not building toward any kind of public reckoning or institutional consequence. He simply wanted Camilla to know that he knew. After 30 years of the official version, after 3 decades of careful management of what was known and what was acknowledged and what was allowed to surface publicly, he wanted there to be one conversation where the letter existed in the room between them, and neither of them pretended otherwise. Catherine sat with that answer for a moment. Then she said she understood. She did not try to talk him out of it. He told Anne before the meeting happened. That decision reflects something important about how William operates in situations of genuine weight. He does not act entirely alone on things that matter. He identifies the people whose judgment he trusts most, and he reads them before he moves. Anne was one of those people, has been for years. He told her about the letter, about its contents, about what he had decided to do with the information. Anne asked him one question. "Are you doing this for yourself or for the institution?" William said for himself. He was honest about that. This was not a strategic institutional decision dressed up as a personal one. It was a personal decision, and he was making it as Diana's son, not as the future king. Anne respected that distinction. She told him she thought he was entitled to it. She also told him to be careful about what he said and what he did not say. That there was a difference between letting Camilla know he had found the letter and making accusations he could not formally substantiate. That Diana's private account, however compelling, was still a private account and needed to be handled with the awareness of what it was. William took that in. He had already arrived at the same position himself, but hearing Anne say it clarified something. He knew exactly what this meeting was and what it was not. He did not tell Charles. That decision was the most significant one in the lead up to the meeting, and it was the one that required the most deliberate consideration. Charles was ill. Charles was managing a medical situation that was taking everything he had. Charles also had a relationship with Camilla that was the central personal relationship of his adult life, a relationship that had survived decades of public hostility and royal resistance and every kind of pressure two people can survive together. Telling Charles about the letter before the meeting with Camilla would have done one of two things. It would have either forced Charles into a position of choosing between his wife and his son at a moment when he had no energy for that choice, or it would have resulted in Charles telling Camilla himself, which would have removed the element that William considered essential. The letter needed to arrive in the room the way Diana had left it, without institutional management, without palace advisors smoothing the edges, without anyone preparing Camilla for what she was about to encounter. William made that calculation and held to it. He would tell Charles afterward. That was the plan. Not before. The intermediary who arranged the meeting was someone both parties trusted independently, not a member of either household staff, not anyone connected to the formal palace apparatus. someone who moved in royal-adjacent circles with enough credibility that a request from them was taken seriously, and enough discretion that neither party worried about the arrangement becoming known. The meeting was set for a Tuesday afternoon in February 2025. Camilla was told it would be an informal conversation, private, between her and William. No aides present on either side. That last detail, no aides, was the one that should have told her something significant was coming. Senior royals do not meet privately without staff present unless the conversation is one they specifically do not want documented or witnessed. She agreed to the terms. William arrived at Windsor first. He had the letter with him, not to read aloud, not to hand over, simply to have it present. A physical object that Diana had touched and written and sealed and hidden, now sitting in a room she had never sat in, waiting for the woman whose name appeared in its pages to walk through the door. He sat with it for several minutes before Camilla arrived. He was not nervous in the conventional sense. He had made his decision. He was clear about what he was going to say and what he was not going to say. He had rehearsed it enough in his own mind that the shape of the conversation was settled before it began. But sitting with his mother's letter in a quiet room at Windsor, waiting, he felt the weight of 30 years pressing against the present moment in a way that was difficult to fully absorb. He absorbed it anyway. Camilla arrived at 2:40 in the afternoon. She was composed. She is almost always composed in situations where composure is the appropriate defensive posture, and she had enough experience of difficult royal encounters to know how to walk into a room and give nothing away before she understood what the room required. She greeted William. He stood. They exchanged the brief courtesies that even the most loaded encounters between royals begin with. Then they sat, and William placed his mother's letter on the table between them. Camilla looked at it. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Anyone who had known Diana would. That looping, distinctive script was as identifiable as a signature. She looked at it for a long moment without speaking. Then she looked at William, and William told her what it contained. He did not read from it. He did not hand it to her. He told her. Methodically, moving through each of the 3 areas Diana had documented, the coordination with courtiers, the security concerns, the account of Charles's situation and the people around him. He spoke without inflection, without accusation in his tone, even when the content of what he was describing was accusatory in its nature. He had decided that the facts Diana had recorded would carry their own weight without him adding emotional pressure to them. He was right. They did. Camilla sat through all of it without interrupting. She did not object, did not dispute, did not reach for any of the defensive responses that a person confronted with difficult information typically reaches for. She sat with her hands in her lap, and she listened to Diana's dead voice delivered through her son's living one. And she did not say a single word until William had finished. When he finished, the room was quiet. William waited. What came back was not what he had expected, and what it revealed about Camilla, about what she had known and what she had carried and what she had never said publicly in 30 years, is the part of this story that changes everything about how we understand her. Camilla's response and what it revealed. She did not deny it. That was the first thing William registered in the silence after he finished speaking. No immediate objection, no reach for the defensive posture of someone confronted with false accusations. No version of that is accurate, or Diana misunderstood what she was seeing. Just silence. Then Camilla spoke. What she said has not been fully disclosed by sources familiar with the meeting. The specific words remain protected by the same discretion that governed the meeting's arrangement. But the shape of her response has been described consistently enough across separate accounts to construct a reliable picture. She acknowledged the letter. She acknowledged that Diana had known more than the official version of events had ever reflected. She did not confirm every specific detail William had walked her through, but she did not dispute the essential picture Diana had drawn either. She said something that sources describe as close to this. Your mother was not wrong about everything she believed. 7 words. Or something close to 7 words, carrying 30 years of weight inside them. William sat with that for a moment. He had not come expecting a confession. He had not come expecting her to dismantle the version of events that had protected her for 3 decades. But he had not expected this either, this quiet, partial, carefully bounded acknowledgement that Diana's account had substance. He asked her one question. Did you know about her security concerns? Camilla looked at him for a long moment before answering. Then she said she had been aware that certain people around Diana believed her concerns were being overstated, that she herself had not been involved in any decisions about Diana's security arrangements. But she had known those conversations were happening. She had known. And she had said nothing. The speechlessness that sources have described was not dramatic silence. It was not Camilla frozen, unable to form words, overwhelmed by what she was confronted with. It was something more specific and more revealing than that. It was the silence of someone who had spent 30 years constructing a version of events careful enough to survive public scrutiny, sitting across from a man holding his dead mother's private account of what had actually happened, and finding that the construction had nowhere left to go. The words that had always been available, the reassurances, the reframings, the careful deflections of a woman who had navigated hostile territory for decades, simply did not come. For the first time in a very long time, Camilla had nothing to say that the situation would bear. William left Windsor with the letter. He did not tell her what he intended to do with it. He left that open, deliberately. What he had needed from the meeting he had gotten. Not a full accounting. Not the complete truth laid out and confirmed and signed. Something smaller and in its way more significant. He had needed Camilla to sit with Diana's words in the room and not be able to make them disappear. She couldn't. Diana had made sure of that. 30 years later, her son made sure it counted. Diana wrote that letter alone. No audience, no strategy, just the truth as she lived it, sealed and hidden in a desk drawer where it sat for 27 years. She could not have known her son would find it, could not have known he would carry it into a room with the woman whose name appeared in its pages and sit across from her until the careful construction of 30 years finally ran out of words. But she wrote it anyway. Because some truths refuse to stay hidden forever. They wait, quietly, until the right person finds them and decides they matter. William decided his mother's truth mattered, and Camilla, for once, had nothing left to say. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and share it. There is more coming.